a fish. I wasted an hour and a half of my life watching one of the stupidest movies of 2010 just to see these idiotic characters protect a fish? A nation sent an entire war fleet to kill one fish. M. Night Shyamalan, allow me to delicately ask, what the frig is going on? Yeah, I know I gave away the big M. Night Shyamalan plot twist, but I don't care. You want to know why? Because this movie is monumentally bad. I'm serious. This is ridiculous filmmaking, even by today's standards. There are movies out there that are trying to do something good, films that have an idea in mind about what they want to bring to the audience, and then there's this crap. Just for the record, I've never watched a single episode of Avatar: The Last Airbender, but I was told by an occasional viewer that it was much better than this movie. It's the story of a young Rip Van Winkle-like boy named Aang, played by Noah Ringer, who wakes up from the ice to find himself captured by the oppressive Fire Nation, an empire of pyromaniacs. You see, Aang is the Avatar, some kind of chosen one who can master the four elements of air, earth, water, and fire. And the Fire Nation wants to fill in the blank. Kill him, control him, steal his powers, they never make it clear. So our two personality-less protagonists, Katara and Sokka, played by Nicola Peltz and Jackson Rathbone, go to rescue Aang from the Fire Nation while trying to bring balance to the Force, destroying the One Ring of Power, and save Narnia from the White. Yeah, they pretty much lost my attention by the 20-minute marker. This has gotta be one of the most lazily written scripts I've encountered in the last decade of movies. Even in comparison to The Happening, I didn't think Shyamalan could head this far downhill. The script is jam-packed with confusing and irrelevant plot points, and it moves the story along so fast, you wouldn't even know what was happening if you cared. And may I remind you, it's all for a fish! No, I'm not letting that go. It's gotta be the most anticlimactic plot twist in the history of cinema. Don't even get me started on this inconsistent direction. We go from characters like Sokka, who is completely hollow of personality, to Dev Patel as the villain Zuko, who's chewing the scenery everywhere he goes. Every member of this cast, big or small, can't work with this embarrassing dialogue. They're reading it from the script, and that's it. Oh, and I want to talk about the whole science behind this bending crap. Every time somebody wants to so much as chuck fire across the room, they have to do this. Why? It's clear from the start that all these people have to do is focus and flick their wrist to summon their element, but they're flapping their arms around like frickin' birds. Tell me something. If you had control over, say, the wind, and enemies were barreling down upon you, are you gonna turn around like a top for 10 seconds? Or are you gonna bring down a frickin' hurricane on them before they gut you like a fish? A fish. I still can't believe it was all for a frickin' fish. Ah! And you know what it is about the movie that aggravates me the most? You know what these characters are supposed to do in their journey? But by the end of the movie, the job's only half done. I hereby diagnose this movie with sequel syndrome. What do I suggest for a cure? Put a bullet in this franchise's eardrum. You want to know what this experience is like? This movie is a clown. Yep, you heard me. It's a clown, stripped of his material, nothing to work with, just poking himself in the eye for an hour and a half in the hope that somebody's entertained. Surrounded with bad visual effects and a very contradicting moral message, Last Airbender blows. My rating for The Last Airbender is a 0.5 out of 5. The only things I find salvageable is some decent costume design and a good soundtrack. I can admit that I still like watching the movie trailer, but solely for its background music. Welcome, fans and foes, viewers and haters. I'm your cinema simpleton because, oh, why waste any time? You know this movie sucked! First, we let Michael Bay have his fun with movie 1. Action was cool, the Transformers were only in half the film, but it was passable. Then came Revenge of the Fallen, and we're still trying to forget the sound of giant robot testicles clanging together. Right off the bat, I'll tell ya, this is no Transformers movie. This is Black Hawk Down, remade by Bay. The difference is somewhere down the line he must have thought, now what can I throw into a mindless action movie that's guaranteed to get attention and doesn't require any creativity on my part? Bullseye! I knew by the end of movie 1 that this film franchise was never made with the kids in mind. But this sequel just buried the hatchet into the friggin' floor. Exactly what 9-year-old boy, who's idolized their heroic icons since preschool, would say, Mr. Bay, can you please put a scene in your movie of Optimus Prime ripping people's faces into confetti and blowing their robotic brains out with shotguns? What in the name of frig is going on? Oh, and the talent. The wasted talent that they dragged down with this movie. John Malkovich, why? Patrick Dempsey, why? That naked guy from The Hangover, why? Even Leonard Nimoy? Have you really no shame, Michael, when you go to such a low that you turn one of the most iconic lines of this actor's career against his own character? Did you even watch Wrath of Khan? You know, even the stuff I'd go watch a Michael Bay movie for is lacking in this installment. They skimp out on the comedy, and the action suffocates whatever plot you could call this movie's storyline. Aside from a quality soundtrack and top-notch CGI, this movie is unredeemable. Don't believe anything this film's marketing tells you. It's not Transformers, and as far as I could hear through the constant explosions, there wasn't any Pink Floyd. My rating for Dark of the Moon is a 1 out of 5. But you know, even for such a piece of crap, you gotta think of the forces behind it. Let's give some credit to those Hollywood professionals who stuck with it till the end. So thank you, Megan Fox, for your commitment to a British accent and dyeing your hair blonde for film 3. Yes, I know what I said. Welcome, fans and foes, viewers and haters. I'm your Raging Canadian, and here's today's review. Cowboy movies. Half of the new ones suck. Comic book movies. Half of the new ones really suck. So naturally, I'm almost downright terrified to so much as glimpse for even a second at DC Comics' upcoming Western adventure film, Jonah Hex. Apparently this movie's been in development hell for years, which isn't exactly a boost of confidence on my part. After all, how many movies that come out of development hell actually turn out pretty good? Indiana Jones 4, Hellboy 2, The Incredible Hulk, they're all mediocre at best. Well, I guess we're about to find out. The trailer opens up with Jonah Hex, played by Josh Brolin, being held back by a group of men led by a guy named Turnbull, played by John Malkovich. Turnbull holds Hex back while he holds his son hostage in the house. Hex pleads for Turnbull to let his son go, but he sets the house on fire to leave the boy to die. Card number 1, familiarity. So this dark vigilante based on a comic book character is unable to save his family from being murdered by his enemies? Yeah, nobody's ever done that before. Twice! Well, Turnbull isn't finished because he decides to brand Hex's face to remind him of the man who took away everything he had, leaving him with a heavy scarring. The trailer says that some say Hex changed after that night, apparently giving him mystical powers. So he got all that from one branding. Then why isn't Texas full of Jesus beef? Apparently Hex now has the ability to return the dead to life with a simple touch. Oh, hi again, familiarity card. You weren't gone very long, were you? So this depressed, vengeful cowboy protagonist is set in the Wild West with supernatural abilities and goes seeking justice against the one responsible for his grief. Once again, in a comic book movie. And you're not hiding anything when you're playing the exact same background music in both movie trailers. Furthermore, if Jonah has had these Deus Ex Machina hands ever since the night his son was killed, then why the heck wouldn't he just use said powers to bring him back? Oh, let me guess, because his son's remains are ashes, right? We just saw this guy vomit a bird. Unless a live crow was his lunch that day, he just created something out of nothing. Confronted by a number of thugs, Hex notices there are 5 coffins conveniently lined against the wall. He says that they might need 8. Wait a second. What? We can clearly see there are only 5 thugs ready to take him in. Unless there are more thugs in this scene, this so-called joke doesn't make a lick of sense. But hey, if that wasn't funny, then how about this for a stupid joke? Hex actually has a pair of machine guns strapped to his horse. You know what? I'm just keeping the familiarity card on standby from here on out. We already know that this cowboy wants to avenge the death of his family. But now you're actually trying to introduce scientific marvels that are clearly decades ahead of their set time period? Well, at least you're not borrowing from a comic book movie anymore. No, now you're just borrowing from one of the worst movies ever made! Next, we're introduced to Hex's love interest, a prostitute named Leela, played by Megan Fox. Prostitute, huh? So this is how far your thinking goes, writers? The bedroom? But hey, they're not entirely to blame for such a character. After all, Fox's southern accent doesn't sound believable in the slightest. Of course, because we're in the Wild West, a thug doesn't think Hex is so tough and asks what happened to his face. Hex sends the guy through a wall and replies, "I cut myself shaving. What happened to yours?" Alright, first of all, we've got another card to play here. Because who needs a personality? I'm awesome! Secondly, Hex was able to knock this man through a wall with whatever weapon he apparently had on him. If this man had been shot in the face with a physical force of that magnitude, his head would have flown clear off his neck. So clearly, he could have only shot him somewhere in the midsection. Hex's bad one-liners don't make any sense. Well, a group of men barge in on Hex and Layla getting foxy, and one guy mentions Turnbull to Hex, who draws a gun against him for even mentioning the name. We're shown a brief flashback to the beginning of the trailer to review the origins of Hex's scar and the burning of his house and son. Well, at least this card isn't familiarity. Here's a fun fact. The viewers aren't morons. We saw this scene just over a minute ago. We already know who Turnbull is and why Hex hates him. Why are you wasting valuable marketing time by re-showing the exact same scenes? Well, the government wants to hire Hex to kill Turnbull for unknown reasons. So Hex goes to his gunsmith to load him up on new weapons, asking if he has anything new. Oh, by new, you mean arsenal that won't exist for a good century or two? Of course. What's your interest today, Mr. Hex? Bazooka? Flamethrower? Atomic bomb? A government officer played by Will Arnett claims, "This is the future." No, this is the 1800s. You guys just think you're in the future because you're putting out more impossible scientific breakthroughs than an ATM puts out cash. While Hex and Layla start to dive into the action montage where we're shown that Turnbull apparently has a mechanical ship full of firepower. Not unlike another movie abomination mentioned earlier in this review, but hey, who's counting the flaws? We're also shown explosion after explosion after explosion. Is the entire Western population just made of dynamite? After the movie's title, Hex and Layla are shown tied up without their weapons. Hex says that they must have searched Layla thoroughly in order to get every weapon she had, to which she replies, "Wouldn't you?" Look, Megan, we get it. You're attractive. Well, I can honestly say that Jonah Hex's trailer is so far the worst movie preview I've seen for the year 2010. The dialogue sounds cheap, the creativity seems to be zip, and from the collage of clips alone, it already makes no sense. The only actors that seem to give this movie a glimmer of hope is Josh Brolin and maybe John Malkovich. You know a movie's gonna be bad when even John friggin' Malkovich can't save it. My rating is a 0.5 out of 10. Jonah, just thank God that your son isn't alive to see this movie.
Welcome fans and freaks, viewers and haters. I'm your Raging Canadian Critic, and here's today's review.
Throughout cinema history, there have always been faces that have terrified us. Monsters that haunt our wildest nightmares. One such face is Freddy Krueger, a serial killer with the power to kill people in their dreams, and currently holds one of cinema's longest-running film series of horror movies. The film series became so popular that Horrorwood decided to remake the movie, and recently premiered their trailer for its fresh start. So the trailer begins with Freddy before his transformation, played by Jackie Earle Haley, being chased by an angry mob in pickup trucks. Oh no! The rednecks are coming! The rednecks are coming! So if none of you are aware, this scene is retelling Freddy's origins, where he's burned alive from a group of angry parents after being acquitted of charges for murdering children. Freddy continues to protest like a whiny little schoolgirl that he didn't do the crime, but the parents refuse to listen and set the building ablaze. Wait a second. The film actually expects us to feel sorry for Freddy Krueger? Hey, sure, why not? After all, he's only repeatedly come back from the dead solely for the intention of killing teenagers. He murdered his wife, abused animals, and revived Jason freaking Voorhees just so he could send him on a murderous rampage. Freddy Krueger isn't a character to be sympathized with. He's one pitchfork short of the devil, and I think we know he's pretty much covered in that department. Who the heck is making this movie anyway? Ah! Next slide! Next slide! After Freddy's origins, we see the trailer cut to the character of Nancy Thompson, who says she's been having weird dreams lately about a burnt man, followed by shots of razor-sharp claws and a silhouette of a man in a fedora. Apparently in this remake, they've decided to keep Freddy in the shadows to make him feel more terrifying to the audience, as well as remaking some of the iconic scenes as a tribute to the original movies, such as the claws reaching toward a girl in the bath while she's dreaming. After this, the teenagers agree they can't afford to fall asleep, so they decide to... Whoa! You're sticking a cigarette lighter into your arm? What the heck is wrong with you, lady? Have you never heard of coffee? The trailer then follows into shots of a funeral, other teenagers being haunted by Freddy, and shots of children ghosts with slash marks across their clothing. Because, you know, Freddy's a nice guy, right? So through several flashes, we see that Freddy's influence is spreading through the teens as they start to battle him in their nightmares. But Freddy proves he's more powerful when he uses the ability to... levitate a girl from her bed? What the heck? This is not The Exorcist! Yes, Freddy Krueger has the power to enter people's dreams, but he can't just play God and make physical objects, and no, I am not calling women objects, float off the ground! Anyway, the trailer then finally shows the grand finale. The first sound of Freddy Krueger's changed voice, and the first glimpse of him in his nightmare form. Alright, the voice isn't that bad, but how about the... Oh, come on! That's Freddy Krueger? He looks like a mix between Two-Face from The Dark Knight, Weapon 11 from X-Men Origins Wolverine, and somebody's 100-year-old grandmother. His mouth looks sewn shut, even though he's somehow talking, and I'm pretty sure his eye sockets are empty. How is he supposed to kill the children of the people who murdered him if he can't see them or anything else? And once again, we see Freddy tormenting a girl with his claws and taunting her. Because, you know, Freddy's a nice guy, right? Finally, the trailer ends with the tagline, "Don't fall asleep," which when you think about it, is a bit incorrect. It doesn't matter if you fall asleep. It's if you dream that Freddy will come for you. Now we could argue about what the difference is from dusk till dawn, but some people actually don't dream. And in Freddy vs. Jason, the teens use a specific drug to prevent themselves from dreaming so that Freddy couldn't get them. So at last, the trailer ends. I suppose I have to admit, I only ever saw the movie Freddy vs. Jason and none of the other Nightmare on Elm Street films. But I have done research on the character online and watched some archive footage of his previous films. But clearly I know at least a little bit of what I'm talking about. What did I think about this trailer? Well, I believe they've gotten close to the original theme of the films, but they're also turning Freddy into something totally different. He's not a tragic character. He's a psychopath!
Welcome, fans and foes, viewers and haters. I'm your cinema simpleton because these days, even Hollywood can't fool an idiot. Let's get back on track. If you've seen the third Rocky movie, then you know we left off with Balboa earning a friendship with former rival Apollo Creed and learning not to box in the name of avenging a dead loved one.
Morals to live by, aren't they? Well, let's just say that this here is the morals of Rocky 3, and this magic little box, it's the contents of Rocky 4.
Yes, folks, what we have here is the movie the fans probably remember the most. Sylvester Stallone versus Dolph Lundgren, the latter of whom was supposedly cast from a selection of not 6, not 7, but 8,000 candidates. In Rocky IV, when we're not watching a James Brown music video, we're seeing the Soviet Union send their towering boxer, Ivan Drago, to face America's champions. Rocky, who's apparently comfortable with retirement, steps aside to give Apollo Creed the shot at taking Drago on, and supports him ringside as his friend promptly fights his way to become a leaking carcass! Yeah, Apollo's dead now. Just when Rocky's starting to respect this guy as a fellow athlete, he flatlines. And the worst part is, after Apollo's death, he's barely talked about or referenced again. Was Rocky just looking for an excuse to go pummel a Russian? Now, you might think that I'm exaggerating with that point, but look at it from the perspective of the viewer. This movie is jam-packed with a political message due to the US and the USSR not being on very friendly terms during the time the movie's set in. Now, I'm all for letting movies have a message between the lines, but do you mind if I ask what the heck Rocky has to do with the Cold War? The patriotism is so forced in this movie that just sitting through the song Living in America makes me feel like somebody's gonna hold me down and tattoo red, white, and blue to my forehead. But when it comes to the Russians, they imply that Drago is cheating through the use of steroids, and they're being represented by a breathing action figure who has no remorse for manslaughter. But like all the Rocky movies, it's the final fight that kept everybody's butts in the theater. And even though the other ones had Rocky defying the odds again and again, it's this boxing match where Balboa's persistence just doesn't add up. He has no strategy, he's not dodging the hits, the only clue that we get as to how he's still conscious is no pain! No pain! No pain! No pain! No pain! No pain! Okay, take it! No pain? That's it? This ain't no mind over matter crap we're talking about here. How hard did they say that Drago could hit?
Drago averages 1,850 pounds.
That's a lot of pain! And on the subject of torture, we lead into Rocky V, the only movie in the series to lose money at the box office. See, due to his last fight with Drago, the doctors have now diagnosed Rocky with brain damage, so his boxing days are pretty well over. So much for no pain, huh? And you think that's bad? Guess what happened while Rocky was away in Russia? All of his money is gone because it was signed over to someone who lost it all in a real estate scheme. Are you wondering who it was that signed over the Balboas to bankruptcy? Well, I'll give you a hint. His name starts with Paulie and it ends in Durr. So the family moves back to the Philadelphia streets and Rocky takes over Mickey's old gym where he starts training a young fighter named Tommy Gunn, played by real-life boxer Tommy Morrison. So if you haven't figured it out by now, the majority of this boxing movie, Rocky doesn't box! This is a very forgettable addition to the film series. Little gets accomplished, and though the movie goes for the angle of Rocky trying to learn to value his family most, it goes in a very dull pacing, and the script just doesn't pull off the drama that well. And Tommy Gunn isn't some likable protege either, because you can tell by the beginning that this guy's got some serious anger issues, and the fame goes straight to his head. He's no new Balboa, he's like some fanboy who's just following him around. According to IMDb.com, Stallone himself considers this film a letdown, giving it a 0 out of 10 in an interview. Hey man, quit stealing my gig! I don't walk on the set of Expendables and start busting Steve Austin's face up, do I? Well, that's mostly because you got a pretty good security team, but hey, that's not the point! Now, with all the negative things to say about Rocky V, there's one silver lining that I just can't pass up talking about. Mixed up in this whole protege storyline is a fight promoter by the name of George Washington Duke. Now, maybe it's just because we're in a boxing movie, but whenever this guy talks, I find something very familiar about him.
You do have marquee value. You put butts in the buckets, asses in the seats. A businessman with any sort of brain don't retire when he can still pull in the bread, baby.
Nothing yet? Well, let's give it a minute.
There's nothing in the boxing business more commercial than a long shot comeback of a down on his luck pure Snow White underdog. No, listen to me. There's a way for you to get the respect you deserve, but what you got to do is challenge Balboa to fight man to man. Then you gotta insult him. You gotta dog him. You gotta humiliate him. You gotta do whatever you got to do to get him into that ring, but that's what you got to do. Because only in America do we get these kind of opportunities. Only in America. Only in America.
Every lightning speed line this guy delivers just leaves me laughing. If they gave him more scenes, it just might have been worth the price of a ticket. But unfortunately, the director, who this time wasn't Stallone, unfortunately didn't realize how good of a thing he had. But the one part that makes any Rocky movie complete is the montage with the song Gonna Fly Now mixed over it. Well, guess what? We don't get it, 'cause Rocky don't get no montage, and the song's only played by a marching band. This is the most un-Rocky movie of all the Rocky movies. And so we reach the conclusion of the Balboa tale, the 6th movie, Rocky Balboa. Over 15 years have passed since the previous match, and while Rocky's fame hasn't been forgotten, his emotional state is at a low. Adrian has died from cancer, his son, now played by Milo Ventimiglia, is trying to earn a place in the world without his father's image over him, and to top it off,
The hell with everybody.
him. In his search for a way to fight away the anger and the grief, Balboa gets the idea to make a comeback into boxing. Despite everybody telling him he's far too old to be able to get back in the ring, he agrees to have an exhibition fight with the current heavyweight champion of the world, Mason Dixon, played by actual boxer Antonio Tarver. And throughout the entire movie, the supporting characters and the audience are holding their breath to see just how much Rocky's got left in him. Now, I know that when it comes to Balboa, he's a fictional character and his chances are moldable to any Hollywood script. But look at the shape Stallone is in this movie! He is chiseled like a bronze statue! Check out the behind-the-scenes footage of this man working out. I swear, you're gonna gain some newfound respect for how awesome this guy is. This movie was also the start of a series of what I like to call the comeback sequels, to franchises we had all but forgotten. Ninja Turtles, Rambo, Die Hard, The Unspeakable, it all brought back a sense of nostalgia to Hollywood that we much appreciated. With Stallone back in the writer and director's chairs, he gave a darker atmosphere to Rocky's world but retained the same classic attitude that hasn't aged a bit. It also let the characters that had had very minor roles in the franchise step up in this film and give them their own significance. Fans have viewed this movie as being one of the best of the series, giving both the former and current generation respect for Rocky's character. And because the last fight was choreographed to look like an athletic boxing match, it didn't leave the audience rolling their eyes as they would have if they adapted one of the former movies into the modern era. And to top it off, the movie's credits were shown alongside footage of real people climbing the famous Rocky steps and posing as the Italian stallion himself. Hey, Stallone? Stallion? Dude, I just got that! In closing, the Rocky series is one that many people pick when it comes to the underdog sports genre. Yeah, the plots and the fights get pretty repetitive, and you could probably turn Rocky's attempts to retire throughout the series into a drinking game, but I think it's the protagonist himself that keeps people coming back to him all these years. Rocky's just always been this optimistic, hilarious guy with plenty of heart and endurance. He starts out as a big brother you wish you had, and by the last movie, he's like some kooky uncle you'd just love to hang out with. And now to the business of the ratings. Rocky IV gets a 2.5 out of 5 for being a very bizarre but still acceptable term for the series. Rocky V gets a 1.5 out of 5 for having some effort but just not having the same quality as the classics. You could go ahead and skip this one and go straight to the 6th and you wouldn't be missing out on much. And lastly, Rocky Balboa earns a rightful 5 out of 5 for being a good drama and bringing Rocky back to a respectable state. Not just clobbering some new boxer, but also giving hope to the fighters of today.
Welcome fans and foes, viewers and haters. I'm your Raging Canadian and here's today's review. Since it's Christmas time, I guess it would only make sense that I review an old Christmas movie. Well, this one isn't that old, but it is most definitely a load of crap! Christmas with the Kranks, also known as the day Tim Allen's career narrowly survived a suicide attempt. It took just one viewing of this movie to make me despise it more than any other Christmas movie in my life. Well, let's get on with the review. And since it's Christmas time, I decided to give a special gift to you, the viewers, this holiday season. Don't worry, this is a gift that anyone can appreciate, no matter what your religious or spiritual beliefs are. What might that gift be? Spoiling this decaying carcass of a movie so you never have to watch it. That's right, Merry freaking Christmas! So the movie starts out with the Kranks, a small family of Christmas fanatics sending their only daughter Blair to Peru, making this Christmas the first one they'll celebrate without her. So after his daughter goes away, Luther Krank, played by the unfortunate Tim Allen, gets the wacky idea of skipping Christmas with his wife and going to the Caribbean instead. Oh my gosh! The very thought that people would actually leave their homes during a holiday is just totally ludicrous. Well, believe it or not, that's exactly what every neighbor in the town thinks of their idea. In fact, they're not only concerned, but angry that the Kranks would do such a thing. And this is actually the main focus of the film. People who are just downright upset over the fact that people won't celebrate Christmas. This has got to be the most insane neighborhood on the friggin' planet. Just two people decide, hey, maybe we'll do something different than Christmas this year. And they look like they're about to burn them at the stake for it. Did this neighborhood ever consider the fact that maybe there are people out there that don't celebrate Christmas? No, I guess the words Hanukkah or Kwanzaa are just considered evil and not truly appreciating the true holiday spirit. You are nothing but bigots! So just how Christmas crazy is this town? Well, they actually stand on the Kranks' lawn and demand that they decorate their house. Why are they doing this? Because they want the neighborhood to win the annual Best Decorated Street contest. Oh, now I get the picture. The neighbors are only interested in getting stuff. Good grief. Isn't the whole meaning of the holidays supposed to be about family and compassion and goodwill toward men? No. Just like a spoiled little child who's upset that they didn't get what they wanted under the tree, these grown adults can't stand the fact that they don't get a pathetic little ribbon. Boo! Frickety! Hoo! Then the movie continues on and carolers come by the neighborhood where they ask if the house across the street is Jewish or Buddhist. And conveniently for this movie, no one of those beliefs are mentioned or seen aside from that remark. Because in this town, they probably killed them already! So after the carolers try to sing them out of their home, the film continues on with its pathetic little plot about the children demanding to see Frosty on the Kranks' roof. Oh, I'm sorry. I had this wonderful little dream that I wasn't watching this movie. So after that scene, Luther decides he's had enough.
What a coincidence. So have I! Luther now sprays his lawn with ice so the carolers will stay away. Why don't you just tell them to leave? So then, after a lot of other useless plot devices, including Luther getting a Botox injection, the Kranks receive a call from Blair with some important news. She's coming home for Christmas after all. And that's not even the best part. She actually got engaged to a guy named Enrique, who she's dated for about a month, and of course, Luther secretly disapproves. So what do the Kranks decide to do? Don't tell your child the truth. Lie! Lie to their face, just so you can cover your own butts. Because that, my friends, is the secret to a happy family. Ladies and gentlemen, the parents of the friggin' year. So with this, the Kranks, or rather just Nora, decide to change their plans and have their annual Christmas Eve party after all. So Luther goes off to the house of a neighbor who asks if he can borrow his tree since the neighbor and his family are leaving town. So let me see if I get this straight. The Kranks decide to go on a little Caribbean cruise during the holidays, and the town makes a huge freaking deal about it, but this family goes away, and nobody ever says a thing about it until now? This story can't even follow its own idiotic logic, and that is pretty sad. You know what? Following this scene is some pretty stupid things. Yes, even for this movie, and I really don't want to go into detail with them. So I'm just gonna sum them up. Nora goes to get Blair's favorite ham and watches it get smashed in front of her when it's only inches away from her fingers. Luther and a kid named Spike try and borrow the tree. Luther gets arrested for stealing it after Spike vanishes for some reason. Spike then returns to be the little twit that he is and prove to the officers that Luther wasn't stealing at all. The police corner the stupidest burglar in the world who steals valuables just so he can chuck it at the police when they corner him. And Luther tries to put Frosty up on the roof but falls off because Tim Allen's never fallen off a roof before on a successful TV show. And Frosty actually stares at him with hellfire in his eyes like he's some kind of demon. As you can guess, the shenanigans only go from bad to worse as they realize their party will only end in disaster. All because they can't stand the fact at disappointing their daughter. Unlike this movie, which seems to have no problem in disappointing its audience. And all the while this putrid garbage continues, a random old man who Nora's never met before talks to her, and she asks him if he'd like to come to their party. Yet this man seems to know her name, her daughter's name, and her address. Do I even need to spell it out for you at how disturbing the thought of this is? So the town starts to come together for the Kranks Christmas party where everybody comes in to celebrate the spirit of the holidays and blah 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 blah. If you wanted us to give a crap about this movie, maybe you would have made it interesting. So the party goes on where Luther is still uptight that he didn't get his vacation and then goes over to a grouchy neighbor's house who is currently in the middle of their own problems, since the neighbor's wife is battling cancer for a third time and may not get to live to see next Christmas. Luther realizes he has been a bit selfish, and decides to skip his vacation plans and give their tickets to the neighbor instead. Now I have to admit, this was a touching scene, but honestly, when the entire build-up to this climax has just been utter crap, I'd rather watch this scene than the movie itself. So as Luther heads home, that pesky burglar has stolen their valuables and gets caught by a Santa from the beginning of the movie with an umbrella. And just who is the Santa in fact? Marty, the random creepy old guy that Nora invited. So Luther and Nora make up in front of the snow, looking at their home with happiness. Well, at least the movie's over with, and it didn't get anywhere. Oh, of course it has to! Not only does Marty turn out to be the Santa Claus from earlier in the movie, but he turns out to be the real Santa Claus! This movie is a freaking joke! And the worst part is,
I'm not laughing! Nobody is! This movie is so stupid it boggles the mind. It's nothing but bickering neighbors making a mountain out of a molehill and acts like they're trying to send a good Christmas message. What message? Give in to peer pressure? Lie to your children? Force your neighbors to believe what you do? Guilt trip people into giving you stuff? The plot is something original that just mutates until it destroys itself. The characters and their performances are just annoying. The comedy is barely passable. And the way people treat this situation is just totally ridiculous. Christmas with the Kranks is just painfully awful and nothing but a train wreck of random plot devices. Its only saving grace is the scene at the end where Luther gives his tickets to the elderly couple. My rating is a 1 out of 10. Welcome fans and foes, viewers and haters. I'm your Raging Canadian and here's today's review. Yeah, I think Narnia is cool. What's it to ya? I liked the stories before I even saw the first two movies, and they generally impressed me. I know they're cheesy, but that's what Disney's known for. Oh, yeah, I forgot. Disney sold the rights to 20th Century Fox. Yay? The trailer for the Voyage of the Treador begins with Edmund Pevensey, played by Skander Keynes, trying to enlist in the British Army before being pulled away by his younger sister Lucy, played by Georgie Henley. I love that these enlistment officers look at Edmund and ask, "Are you really 18? Yeah, 'cause back then the recruitment department was so difficult for a 16-year-old to fool them, right? Now before I go any deeper, I'm gonna warn you, I saw a lot of familiarity in this trailer. With what? Well, the last movie. It doesn't feel like a total ripoff to Prince Caspian, but there's a lot of stuff in this plot and these character arcs that we've already seen before, and we're seeing again. So when I notice familiarity between Voyage of the Treador and Prince Caspian, I'm going to shout out F for you to clue in. Edmund is complaining that he used to be a king in Narnia, and now he feels misplaced in the real world. F. His sister Lucy comes to remind him that this is where they belong right now. F. Something that I love about this trailer is that they're showing us that Keynes and Henley have brought a lot more maturity to their characters. Their acting has a little bit of ways to go, but it's not totally terrible either. Anyway, Edmund and Lucy notice a painting in their room with a young kid beside them. Apparently the kid is their cousin, Eustace Scrubb. Yeah, apparently the writers were having a contest for who could come up with the weirdest name. So before the kids know it, water is flowing out of the painting and into the room. Lucy says very calmly, "Edmund, the painting!" Okay, I get that you kids have gone into magical worlds and you have the words Deus Ex Machina officially in your vocabulary, but the room is turning into Lake Michigan! Somehow the words, "the painting," don't really sum up how you should be reacting. So as the room around them is damaged by the water, Edmund, Lucy, and Eustace go through the painting and are transported into Narnia. Why is it since Prince Caspian that the doorways to this whimsical world have to be so friggin' dangerous? The three end up in the middle of the ocean, where they're fished out by the most colorfully fakest ship you've seen in years. I mean, wow, Disney's CGI animators weren't the next Avatar creators, but that is just bad! On the ship, Aslan, voiced by Liam Neeson, is there to greet them along with Reepicheep the mouse and other poorly designed armored animals. Apparently there's no war this time around, so Edmund asks his old friend Caspian, played by Ben Barnes, why they've been summoned to Narnia. Insert magical old fart number 1, who with a roll of his carpet says, "You're all about to be tested." Tested? Wow! That tells us nothing. We then move to a bunch of green smoke curling around the ship where we see the White Witch's ghost haunting Edmund. F. You know, I found that the story arc with Edmund and the Witch had a solid ending in Prince Caspian. You know, on account that he friggin' impaled her ghost. Why does she need another cameo? And did anybody else notice how friggin' eerie this got all of a sudden? I mean, yeah, the last movie was kind of dark, but this is pretty creepy. I was under the impression that this franchise was for kids.
Hey, look, son, the new Narnia movie's coming out. Want to go see that this Christmas?
Why, Santa? Why? Then we get a scene of Lucy opening up a book where she sees her reflection slowly morph into that of her sister Susan. Then, with the roar of a lion, it shuts on her and shows the room filling up with snow. Alright. Okay, maybe I'm the only one wondering this, but I'm going to take a shot in the dark. Where's the plot? After that, we see some killer shots of the ship in the ocean, leading to a glowing girl saying, "The fate of Narnia depends on you." We also see Edmund holding a glowing blue sword. So now I can really play the familiarity card. Following that is a couple of fight scenes, some dwarves jumping around like frogs, and Eustace saying that this place just gets weirder and weirder. You know, the kids actually got a good point there. Speaking of which, has anybody seen where that plot went to? The trailer concludes with Aslan's words, "They have returned for a reason," showing a montage of Edmund, Lucy, Peter, and Susan. Huh? What the frig is going on? Was I the only one that heard Peter and Susan say in the last movie that they weren't needed in Narnia anymore? So why are they here? Isn't the point of this movie supposed to show that Emmett and Lucy don't need their older siblings to save their butts? Well, that was Voyage of the Dawn Treader's first trailer. You know, from the first glance of it, the movie certainly doesn't look as bad as I thought it was going to be. In fact, I think it still retains some interest for me. My complaint is that the movie looks like it's gotten a bit more mature in its environment and a bit more cliche in its dialogue. I was also very confused while watching this preview. The trailer acts like a theatrical trailer, and yet it doesn't tell us the plot. In a teaser trailer, you hardly get any dialogue, and the scenes go by so quickly that it does just that. Teases you. Here, we get lots of dialogue, and the scenes are very drawn out. The problem is that they're jumbled together and they don't explain anything. It's a collage of randomness. The trailer's background music by Two Steps from Hell is well fitting, giving it a very adventurous feel instead of the usual kind of war impression. And I think the scenery and sets look very vibrant on screen. But the trailer isn't telling us anything to do with the plot other than you're about to be tested. That's pretty vague, guys. And I thought the themes the trailer was trying to get across to the audience felt like they received a 180-degree turn by the end of the trailer. My rating for the Chronicles of Narnia, the Voyage of the Dawn Treader's trailer, wow, there's a mouthful, is a 4 out of 10. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm off to go look for this movie's plot. Welcome, fans and foes, viewers and haters. I'm your cinema simpleton because these days, even Hollywood can't fool an idiot. Some of you may or may not know that I'm a Christian, which probably attributes to the reason I hold back a lot of the time from cussing into my microphone. No matter how much a monkey fighting movie deserves it. But here's something I bet you'd never expect to hear from me or any other believer. I think most Christian films are boring. I'm all for trying to spread a message for people to understand in various mediums, whether it's books, movies, television, whatever. But almost every Christian movie I see, over and over again, repeats the same, repetitive, brain-slapping moral that I'm sick of being jammed down my throat.
Hey, you! Read the Bible!
The reason the Christian film industry is laughed off is because their movies make their message so forceful. Movie messages are about subtlety. Let the audience decide for themselves what they've learned about characters, their stories, and life lessons. That's what professional filmmakers do, and they don't have to compromise their own religious beliefs. I'm not saying using meaningful Bible verses or saying, God help me in my life because of blank doesn't have its uses. But I'm saying, if that's all your movie is full of, then you don't have a movie message. You have an hour-and-a-half long sermon that people could go to church for free for. Oh, and before any of you start, these movies have not weakened my faith in any way. And neither am I saying that I don't support them financially. I'm saying that Christian movies need to really work harder in their acting and writing, and not just, what VeggieTales message am I going to throw into the script today? If that's all you're thinking of, it's no wonder the only people you entertain are Christians. So this review starts my movie marathon of some of the best and worst Christian movies I've seen. No, I'm not talking about the biblical epic films like Ben-Hur, Passion of the Christ, or that weird Noah movie starring John Boy. I'm talking about giving the modern Christian film industry an honest review without looking through cross-shaped glasses. To start with, I'm going to look at the Christian movie everybody probably knows about, Left Behind. Yeah, you probably remember this after that Simpsons episode about the rapture. This movie was the first film adaptation of a book series that told about the modern world going through the biblical book of Revelation. The apocalypse, the Antichrist, the second coming of Jesus, all that stuff atheists love to make fun of us for. And for anybody who's trying to start a religious debate on this video, go take it somewhere else. I'm only saying this because I see thousands of these cyberbullying comments from both sides of the argument all over YouTube, from everything to people's religious testimonies to skillet music videos. And this is not a religious debate video. It's a frickin' movie review! But back to Left Behind the movie. This film got the majority of its attention from a bigger production than the normal Christian film, and its marketing decision to be sold on home release before it was put on the big screen. And included in the DVD and VHS copies was a free ticket to go and see the movie when it was shown in theaters. Well, that's a unique promotional strategy. So the movie's famous plot is about the world in crisis due to the unexplained disappearances of millions of people around the globe, and everyone left searching to find answers to what happened. Journalist Buck Williams, played by Kirk Cameron, is after the truth, and on the way discovers murder, political conspiracy, and faith in God. So now we come to the number one problem I have with almost every Christian movie out there. These actors can't act. Oh, there are exceptions in this movie, like Janaea Stevens, Brad Johnson, but everybody else just delivers performances that are either landing on the side of melodramatic or phoned in. Cameron just has a knock-on-wood performance, which doesn't help when you're the protagonist. But I will say, out of the sequels that followed, yeah, you heard me right, this is the best of his work. Now, before I continue socking this movie in the gut, let me name its most applause-worthy factors. The direction is solid, giving you a big scale and a lot of intrigue and investment into what's really happening to everybody around the world. When the people have disappeared, it's no wonder you're freaked out with the way they crafted these scenes. And there's a very nice orchestral score woven into the script, but the Christian pop music just really kills the mood fast when you're going for something dramatic. Oh, and before you start thinking I'm giving this movie a harsh looking over because it's from Christian Hollywood, wait till you hear this. Tim LaHaye, one of the authors of the book the film's based on, even he didn't like it. In fact, he filed suit against the studios because he claimed the movie the studio promised they would make was not what they delivered. But it's not like they would radically change from the source material, right? In my honest opinion, Left Behind the movie isn't that terrible of a film. Considering what they showed, they worked well within the restrictions of a limited budget, but they delivered a story with hollow character development. Compared to the two sequels that followed, though, this is the one worth your time. My rating for Left Behind the movie is a 2.5 out of 5. Believe me, for the Christian movies I've got lined up to review for you, you ain't seen the crap yet.
Spider-Man 3 was one of the most anticipated movies of 2007, and probably the most anticipated superhero movie of the time. This is before The Dark Knight. The two movies before it were great and awesome, and the cast had done a stupendous job. So naturally, we all fell for the ruse that this movie would top them both. Now, to be fair, I don't think that Spider-Man 3 totally sucked. I just think they made a lot of bad decisions for it. There was way too many storylines that could have been cut, characters that didn't need to come in at all, and things we were looking forward to that just didn't meet our expectations. As a movie critic and a comic book fan, I wasn't angry, I was just let down. I could badger all I want about them not treating the comics right, especially Harry Osborn looking like a flying paintballer, but this video is more about the movie itself. So here we have it, the bottom 5 worst decisions of Spider-Man 3. Number 5 goes to Peter needing the emo hairstyle whenever the symbiote took over. Why the heck does he need to do that? Do you really think we can't tell that the symbiote is controlling Peter when he slams Eddie Brock against a wall or pimp slaps MJ across the face? This was a useless gimmick that I never understood. The filmmakers obviously wanted to make Peter look cool and dark when the symbiote influenced him, so they decided that the audience needed a way to know when Peter was in control and when the costume was. Because apparently, the audience is that stupid! I've personally tried the emo hairstyle a couple years back, and I stopped doing it for the same reason Peter should have quit. It makes him look ridiculous! It works for some people, but not everyone! Plus, when Peter was under the control of the symbiote, his skin looked paler and he had the eyes of a junkie. Now, if you made that more visible, then he wouldn't look lame. He looked like the suit was sucking the life out of him, which is what it was doing all along. Number 4 goes to Gwen Stacy. What was the point of bringing her into this movie? Now, you're probably thinking, well, she serves as a love interest to Eddie and Peter. Okay, but does her character have anything to do with the story itself? No, she's useless. Another face from the comics that they just slapped in there for no reason but to be part of an awkward love triangle. For the third movie, I and a lot of other fans were really looking forward to a character like Felicia Hardy coming onto the screen, especially since her alter ego Black Cat was supposed to debut in Spider-Man 2. If this movie didn't have so many crowded storylines, Black Cat would have been perfect for it. Peter would be going all dark from the symbiote, and there would be Black Cat to sort of tempt him towards a wilder, more free lifestyle. But instead, Peter goes for this chick, who's just there to throw a wrench in his plans to propose to Mary Jane. I don't even know what he likes so much about her. Yeah, she is attractive, but she's just so ditzy and has the personality of a coconut. Gwen Stacy was a popular character in the comics, but the thing she's actually known most for is being killed by the Green Goblin and serving as a method of setting Spider-Man on a whole revenge phase. And she doesn't even serve that purpose in the movie. Her character's alive and well by the end, and her story arc doesn't even go anywhere. Gwen Stacy feels like a stereotyped dumb blonde. She didn't have any chemistry with Peter or Eddie. She just stood there as eye candy, and that was all. She had no purpose other than to make MJ jealous and to make out with Spidey. Number 3 goes to Sandman turning out to be the real killer of Uncle Ben. I really hated this decision. The thing I liked about the first movie is that Uncle Ben got killed by a random guy. Not somebody who was going to come back in the end all superpowered to battle Spider-Man. Because that is the real world. If your uncle got murdered, would you expect the killer to become your greatest enemy later on in life? No, you'd expect them to get caught by the cops and put in jail. But of course, somebody got the great idea of rewriting the origin entirely. Uncle Ben wasn't killed off by this guy. He was killed off by Flint Marko, who served only 2 purposes in this movie: showing off visual effects and destroying something that didn't feel like a cliche from the first movie. The origin was almost a total ripoff of Tim Burton's Batman, where we found out that Joker killed Bruce Wayne's parents. But here, we're supposed to feel sorry for Sandman because his daughter was dying and that the shooting was all an accident. So if his daughter was dying 2 years ago, wouldn't she be dead by this point? Here you had something that we could all understand, and you totally shredded it apart just to go full circle. Thanks a lot! Number 2 goes to the butler confessing to Harry about his father's death. When I walked out of the theater, the first question I had on my mind was, why the heck didn't he tell Harry this years ago? We find out at the end of the movie that Harry's butler Bernard cleaned Norman Osborn's wound and realized he had been impaled by his own glider. And conveniently, for the sake of a trilogy, he never tells Harry the truth until this point of how his father died,
or that he was the Green freaking Goblin.
Why the heck would you never tell Harry this? Dude, do you realize he wants to kill his best friend over a misunderstanding that only 2 people can prove, and you're the only one of them that Harry will listen to? This is what we like to call a plot hole! Number 1 goes to an inexcusable piece of stupidity. Peter dancing in the street like a complete loser in New York. I almost don't have the stomach to watch this scene again. For no reason at all, after Peter decides to let the suit take full control of him, he dances around the streets of New York thinking he's as cool as the Fonz. I actually thought he was gonna do a friggin' singing number in this scene. Why in the world is he doing this? Nobody watching him on screen or even in the movie itself thinks it's cool. They think he has brain damage or something. I don't know who wrote this scene and what drugs they were on, but if you think somebody doing moves that died out of coolness almost 50 years ago is worth watching to a 2007 audience, get in your time machine and go back to the 60s. I can't think of anybody who watched this scene and didn't hate it or make fun of it. Spider-Man is supposed to be making jokes, not become one! So there you have it, the bottom 5 worst decisions of Spider-Man 3. Oh, what a dork.